Good day everyone. So today we will be discussing the history of special and inclusive education. So at the end of this discussion, the students shall to explore and understand the evolution of special education, and in order to gain insight into the progress of special education, so we really need to know the timeline of the special and inclusive education back then, kung asa siya nagikan, and even up to today kung unsay mga nagahitabo sa tuwang special and inclusive education, kung kini ba ay effective ilang gibuhat. So the content is the history of special education beginning in the 18th century. So back in 18th century, nagbigay na guni siya. Pero before sa 18th century, person with disabilities, they cannot have a free access to education. And they even said that they have been cursed by the evil powers, or they even gisumpa sila sa nature. That's why it's very hard to imagine back then that they didn't have the free access to education, kay unsaan nila pag-communicate to each other without disabilities nga ilang kaistorya, or even though wala sila guro free access to education, mahita na lang sila own way to communicate to other people. That's why it's very sad to hear that they don't accept the person with disabilities back then. So the next topic will be discussed by my co-groupmates.
The Enlightenment period influenced special education in many ways. Jean-Jacques Rousseau publishes his email, a book about the education of children. Charles Michael LPE is one of the pioneers in 18th century, and he is concerned about the education of disabled. 19th century, the special education become more palpable. Thomas Galduet and Samuel Howe, sila duha gatake silag action para sa special education, and Thomas Galduet siya ang pinakauna nga nag-implement sa School of Deaf atong 1817, and the second school was ang American Asylum for the Deaf and Dumb. In 1890, the state's responsibility in providing institution for the special children, and in 1897, ang Department of Special Education was created by the NEA, which is National Education Association. In 20th century, diri na implement ang laws na ma-assure nga tanang tao nga naay disabilities is naay rights nga makaeskwela, and in 1906, the New York University include a courses training program for special education.
For the continuation, the test would be applied to the American standards, and the idea of intelligence quotient was introduced in 1916 by Lewis Terman, renaming the test from Simon Binet Scale to Stanford Binet Scale. Continuing the wave of implementations, in 1918 all states recognized that all citizens have the right to education, and in 1922 the Council of Exceptional Children, or CSC, was founded by Elizabeth Farrell. This council plays an important role in providing laws to protect those with disabilities. So unlike before, that educational institutions were primarily accessible to men, while the women were expected to prioritize domestic duties and family responsibilities rather than to pursuing their education, and also the persons with disability. So with this implementation, the citizens have right to education. In 1931, the United States Office of Education established a section on the exceptional children, and in 1936, blind persons are included in the Social Security Act of 1935. 1936, blind persons are included in the Social Security Act of 1935. So the definition of the Social Security Act is to provide benefits for old-age retirees, the unemployed, dependent mothers, and children. 1950s, the number of changes made in the governmental area was significant. 1950, the National Association for Retarded Children, or NARC, was founded by Parents for Children with Mental Disabilities, or the IDD, or Intellectual and Development Disabilities.
Moving forward to my topic, in 1954, it was stated by the Supreme Court of the United States that all children have the right to education in equal terms. In 1958, President Eisenhower signed Public Law 85926, which provided grants to colleges and universities to make sure that courses would be offered to prepare teachers for special education. Also, in 1965, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act was passed, and it provided funds for schools in order to have a proper environment for children with disabilities. And also, in 1966, it was the turn of the Education of Handicap Act, which was passed in order to grant funds to school to train teachers, but also required of Bureau of Education for the Handicap in in the Office of Education. In 1972, the case of Mills versus District of Columbia Board of Education, and in 1973, the Rehabilitation Act was passed and assured the rights of people with disabilities in respect to a non-discriminative environment in education, employment, and housing. In 1975, the sum of all small acts towards the education of handicapped children emerged in Public Law 94142. In 1990, after being revised, Public Law 94142 became known as IDEA, or Individual with Disabilities Education Act, has been revised again in 1997. In 1990, the American with Disabilities Act was passed, guaranteeing that implementation would be made to people with disabilities in the work environment, as well as in public transportation and telecommunication.
In continuation, 1991 RA 7277 was inaugurated. 1993, DEX issued Order Number 14, Executive Order Number 385 was enacted. 1995, First National Sports Summit for Disabled and Elderly. 1997, First Teacher Training Program for the Integration of Autistic Children. 2000, Recognized SPED Center in the Philippines. 2001, Magna Carta for Disabled Persona. 2003, RA 9262, Anti-Child Abuse Law. 2011, Indigenous People Education Program. 2012, DepEd Order Number 105, Guidelines or the Enhanced Alternative Learning System. 2013, RA 10630, Expanded Juvenile Justice and Welfare Act. 2015, DepEd Order Number 32, Series of 2015, Adapting the EPID Curriculum Framework. 2017, DepEd Order Number 32, Series of 2017, Gender Responsive Basic Education Policy. 2019, RA 11510 and Act. 2021, the DepEd Order 44, Series of 2021, Policy Guidelines on the Provision on Educational Programs and Services for Learners with Disabilities in the K-12 BEP. 2022, DepEd Order Number 23, Series of 2022, Child Find Policy for Learners with Disabilities, or LWDs, towards inclusive education. In conclusion, inclusive education is not just relevant today, it's essential. It's about recognizing that diversity is our strength and ensuring that every individual, regardless of their background or abilities, has an equal opportunity to succeed in our interconnected world. Inclusive education is the pathway to a more equitable and inclusive society. Thank you, and once again, good afternoon.